Me here on GB News. I've been in this game for 40 years and I've made lots of friends, and I try and reflect what they think about the big stories of the day in conversation with me. That's why we call it Alistair Stewart and Friends, and you're a key part of it as well. I always get inundated with emails and messages and texts, and if they're really good, I play them back to you. 12 till 3 every Saturday and Sunday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
And welcome to a new week of On the Money, your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about whether nuclear power can help solve the UK's energy crisis with people who really know their stuff. But first, it's the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Thank you, Liam. I'm Rosie. Let's get you up to date at 1 o'clock. MPs will hold an emergency debate on parliamentary standards this afternoon following accusations of corruption. Well, that's as the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, faces calls for a public inquiry into allegations of Tory sleaze. Last week, the government made a U-turn after a vote was passed to overhaul its misconduct system, blocking the suspension of Owen Paterson for breaching lobbying rules. The Shadow Child Poverty Secretary, Wes Streeting, told GB News a public inquiry and an official apology are needed.
I think we need an inquiry about how that contract was awarded, because it seems there was no tender process, no competition. So I think we need to know that it was above board and that taxpayers' money was well spent. He needs to call off the attack dogs who've been sent out to attack the House of Commons Standards Commissioner, and make it clear that the Standards Commissioner will have the full backing of the government to pursue MPs without fear or favour, to make sure we're upholding basic standards of decency in public life. And it's about time Boris Johnson himself apologised, because at the end of the day, the fish rots from the head, and these kinds of grubby standards are the standards set by Boris Johnson in Number 10, and it's just not acceptable.
Police in the French city of Cannes have shot a man who attacked a group of officers with a knife. One policeman was stabbed but escaped injury, protected by his bulletproof vest. The suspect allegedly tried to attack a second officer when the third policeman opened fire. Sources say the attacker claimed to have been acting in the name of the Prophet. Former US President Barack Obama says island nations are the canaries in the coal mine of climate change. While speaking at the COP26 summit, he said wealthy countries have an added burden to help those less able and more vulnerable. He's expected to make a speech this afternoon detailing the progress that's been made since the Paris Agreement. UK travellers can now fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors who must also take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. Children need to be tested 3 to 5 days later. Airlines synchronised their takeoff on both sides of the Atlantic this morning to mark the occasion.
At home for so long, for somebody that travels quite a lot historically, a bit apprehensive, I guess, with all the hoops you have to jump through to travel, but otherwise, yeah, it's going to be a good change of scenery.
Just amazing, isn't it? Yeah, it's been a long time waiting to find out. Exactly. We've just been waiting with bated breath, and then suddenly the announcement came, and yeah, so happy to be getting back to it. For me, it's my first time to the US, so really excited.
This is a massive moment for the aviation sector as we look to build back better from the terrible blow that the coronavirus pandemic has laid to us. So it's about people fundamentally. It's about getting families back together. It's about making sure that when you haven't seen friends for years that you're able to go out and do that. And that's particularly important with Thanksgiving and with Christmas coming up.
A British man killed in a shark attack off Western Australia has been described as a wonderful father. 57-year-old Paul Miller-Chip was swimming at Port Beach near Perth when the alarm was raised. During a search for his body, police recovered a pair of goggles. His wife, who doesn't want to be named, said he died doing what he loved.
Rest in peace, Paul. He died what he enjoyed doing the most, which was exercising. He was a wonderful man, wonderful father, and he loved his exercise.
Marks & Spencer have introduced pronoun-inclusive name badges for staff. The idea came from an employee, means that workers can now wear whichever combination of pronouns they choose. The supermarket chain says the initiative is a simple yet impactful way to make sure LGBTQ+ identities are respected. A dress worn by Amy Winehouse has sold for more than £180,000 at auction, 16 times the original estimate. The halter neck was worn by the singer during her final stage performance, a month before her death at age 27. More than £3 million was raised from the sale of over 800 items, including clothing, handwritten notes and accessories. You're right up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you the latest headlines in half an hour. But right now, let's return to On the Money and Liam.
And this is On the Money. Today we're talking nuclear power as manufacturing thoroughbred Rolls-Royce secures commercial funding to develop small-scale nuclear reactors in the UK. Plus, each day On the Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview with a business leader or policymaker. Today we're talking to Avi Lazaro, the CEO of Prenetics, a leading genetics and diagnostic health testing company pioneering COVID-19 testing solutions across Britain. That's later in the show. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, suggestions, solutions. What should On the Money be covering? What do you think of today's debate? Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @GBNews. We'll be reading out some of your emails later in the show, so stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Now, Rolls-Royce has secured funding to develop small-scale nuclear reactors in the UK. The British manufacturing thoroughbred is about to announce backing from a consortium of investors to fund for SMRs, or small modular reactors. After the government committed £210 million of funding, the private sector is believed to have matched that total. And while SMRs are smaller than the major nuclear plants, such as the one under construction at Hinkley Point in Somerset, they could play a major role in the UK's future energy mix. Britain remains embroiled in an energy crisis, and for all the COP26 posturing and virtue signalling about our carbon-free future, we're still heavily dependent on fossil fuels. The UK government's just asked the Gulf state of Qatar to become our gas supplier of last resort, amid shortages of the fuel across Europe, which have sparked record wholesale gas prices and soaring household bills too. And even amidst this Glasgow summit, the Western world has kept pressuring the OPEC oil exporters cartel to pump yet more crude, once again, to ease an energy crunch which has seen inflation soar on both sides of the Atlantic. The UK still relies on gas for around 40% of our electricity production. Renewables, wind, biomass, hydro and solar also account for about 40% between them. With coal barely featuring in electricity production, much of the rest, around 15 to 20%, comes from atomic energy or nuclear. Now, environmental purists shun nuclear energy, but there's increasing recognition that industry's hugely improved safety record means nuclear could make a major contribution to decarbonisation, as it were, filling the renewables gap when the wind doesn't blow. France relies on nuclear for around 70% of its electricity generation, and the European Commission is now considering granting atomic power so-called green status, even though Germany has sought to decommission nuclear after the 2011 earthquake that threatened Japan's Fukushima nuclear station. Until now, nukes have been excluded from the EU's Green Deal because while nuclear stations emit no CO2, the long-term ecological implications of storing spent fuel remain unclear. Yet the development and manufacturing of small-scale modular reactors, those SMRs, by Rolls-Royce, could reorient and reboot not just the UK's atomic energy complex, but the nuclear power industry worldwide, if the Derbyshire-based firm can perfect the technology and get the economics of manufacture right. On top of that, while we need to find safer ways to store the radioactive waste resulting from nuclear fission, that is, splitting uranium atoms, let us not ignore nuclear fusion. The UK Atomic Energy Authority is at the cutting edge of nuclear fusion research that generates none of the toxic waste of traditional nuclear generation. Whatever you think of this COP26 agenda and the summit and the virtue signalling and the chest beating, the fact remains that coal, oil and gas are pollutants and will ultimately run out, causing huge international conflicts as they do. We need to use less of them. The key to that isn't what we're seeing in Glasgow, the emoting about the sins of other people in far-flung countries having flown in by private jet. No. The way to use less fossil fuel is to be technologically savvy. And with Rolls-Royce soon to make a big announcement, that's our on-the-money question today. Can nuclear help solve the UK's energy crisis? If you're new to On the Money, you'll soon find out that what we do on this show is have in-depth conversations with people who really know their stuff. Joining me in my panel, we have Wade Allison, Professor at the University of Oxford, who specialises in nuclear physics. We have Brendan Chilton, the co-founder and CEO of the Independent British Business Network. Also joining us from France, Angela Knight, former Treasury Minister, former CEO of Energy UK, a friend of the show. Plus, in the studio, Justin Urquhart-Stewart, another On the Money regular and the co-founder of Regionally. Thank you all for joining me. Professor Allison, let's go to you first. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Money. What did you make of my opening remarks that nuclear could and should play a bigger role in the UK's energy mix?
Well, not only could it definitely should. And renewables are very disappointing in their reliability. They're very disappointing in to survive the extreme weather that we are getting increasingly now. And I'm sure that 100 years' time, when you look at the energy that people are using, they'll say, why did you use that horse and cart technology of windmills and solar things, which don't work all the time? What you need is nuclear, which works consistently all the time and can provide everything you need.
Angela Knight, let's turn to you. I know you're very knowledgeable about the energy industry. We've spoken many times here on the show. I highlighted there in my remarks the development of nuclear nuclear fusion, the new technology. Nuclear fission, of course, is about splitting atoms, which for the foreseeable future will be the bulk of our nuclear capability. So just reassure viewers, won't you, about the safety concerns that they will have about nuclear industry and splitting atoms and the resulting radioactive waste.
And I think that the public can be very confident in nuclear power. I mean, over the years, there's been a huge amount spent on safety and a huge amount of research done in order to ensure just that nuclear power is safe for us. And whilst you're absolutely right, you know, that has been said in the introduction, Liam, that there was the disaster in Japan, that was an earthquake, and it was a tidal wave, and it was a power station that was sat right on the edge of the sea. And what's more, you know, they did actually manage to handle it as well. So even under the extraordinary conditions, which nobody is proposing that one ever builds a power station like that again, nevertheless, that nuclear power station they did manage to shut it down. Now, what's being proposed in the UK is small reactors, not just big reactors. And the small reactors, they can be built quicker, the design can be repeated, and what's more, they're more cost effective. And whilst I do agree that we need to develop both wind power and to a certain extent solar, of course, solar in the UK, it's nothing like as good as solar in the southern European countries, for example. But whereas I am entirely supportive of the development of the renewables, it is exactly as the professor said, the renewables are only available intermittently, and we have to have a secure backup. Biomass is not a secure backup because that is in effect burning trees. And whilst I do appreciate you can plant trees again, nevertheless, it seems to be a little bit of pin dancing rather than getting to the nub and core of what is required, which is a secure, safe base load of power that is, I'll use the expression green. That's exactly what we need. And that's exactly why I think the announcement that we're hoping to hear from Rolls-Royce is so important.
Brendan Chilton of the Independent Business Network, we are focusing on nuclear today because of that impending announcement from Rolls-Royce, which will be watched around the world. We've discussed here on The Money before and during this COP26 summit all kinds of energy issues, hydrogen and so on. To what extent do you think the private sector is ready to really invest in nuclear? We hear that Rolls-Royce has raised this 200 million quid or so. That's proper money, but it's not a huge amount of money, is it? So to what extent is government reticence about nuclear, ongoing doubts, holding back a wall of private sector money that could help get the British atomic energy industry where it was back in the 60s? Back in the 60s, we generated more nuclear power than the whole of the rest of the world put together.
Well, quite. I think at the moment, business and particularly private sector investors are really waiting to see the outcome of COP. We're obviously being told there's going to be enormous changes emerging from that conference on our day-to-day lives in all sorts of areas, tax and regulation, etc. But I think you're absolutely right. The UK does need to really make a decision, and this sort of waiting and seeing is really holding back investment opportunities. I personally think that nuclear is the way to go. Certainly, if you look at it from a cost analysis point of view, it's way cheaper than sort of carbon gas storage, and also cheaper than wind as well. Now, in terms of reliability, as the former speaker was just saying, it's far more reliable than wind. And of course, in terms of land space that it takes up, it's far smaller than any wind plants that you would require. And so from that point of view, it's also more environmentally friendly. Now, the cost of all this, you're right, the 200 million announced is not an enormous amount of money, but it is a start. And let's remember, these are much smaller reactors that we're talking about being set up around the UK. Now, The other thing we need to think about too is energy security. Now, one of the charts you showed earlier on, which highlighted the amount of fossil fuels we are still dependent on, the other important point is the source of a lot of this. We do import a lot of gas, for example, from unreliable partners, which we don't necessarily want to be doing in the future because that has an add-on environmental sort of negative because of all the transport costs involved. And of course, countries like Russia are not necessarily flavour of the month with us at the moment for obvious reasons. So nuclear is the way to go, far more important for business and business security.
Justin, you and I, we're on a panel here with three proper experts in this area, not least we've got Wade Allison, one of the world's leading authorities on this. We're generalists, we're looking on this as sort of financially literate people. To what extent do you think the private sector is reassured that the likes of Rolls-Royce can raise money for nuclear? Could this open the sluice gates to much more private sector funding in this space?
Depending on how the announcement comes through, with the detail of it, and I think actually private investment will be more assured by this because the projects are smaller, they're faster to bring through, and as Andrew just said, you've actually got the same technology being repeated again. The trouble with our big...
Scalable.
Yes, scalable. These big reactors, every single one seems to have variations and differences. So actually, each one seems to go up in cost the entire time.
And they're built by the French or the Finns or the Japanese or the Americans.
Or we find the Chinese involved with it as well.
Indeed.
Now we're actually with this. Now also look, and we want to have the details of the new funding system, this regulated asset-based system, which they claim is going to be cheaper to do it. And the main difference is, under the old contract for difference system they had, you didn't get any money back till it started producing some energy.
Yeah.
This way, investors will start getting money back straight away, part through the process. That will attract investors far more, rather than sitting there saying, I've got to wait 10, 15 years before I start seeing anything out of it.
And hopefully the contract won't be all complex, everything hinging on a strike price, some kind of guesstimate of the future price of energy, which of course can end up being a really bad deal for the state.
Yeah, you're just taking a punt then on actually what you think the price is going to be like. And we know how dangerous that can be. No, keep it small, keep it on a basis where we all actually measure the risk involved, financial as well as obviously operational risk, and the ability to repeat and, as you say, scale this all up. That's it. And we're not then having to rely just on one. Make sure we still need renewables and all those other things. But hark back to those lovely days of the BBC in black and white saying, welcome to Calder Hall. And here we'll be having free electricity for the future. How innocent were we?
Professor Allison, let's go back to you. We're going to carry on this discussion after the break, but just before we come to the break, how important do you think it is, as I alluded to there, that it would be Rolls-Royce driving forward our nuclear future rather than EDF, largely owned by the French government, rather than a Finnish consortium or American consortium or a Japanese consortium? Would this mark Britain getting back its world-class expertise in atomic energy?
Well, I don't think you should think of these things too nationally. The point is that initiatives like the Rolls-Royce initiative are being pursued in Canada and in America and in Russia and so on. So Rolls-Royce is going to have quite a lot of competition, and some of those, the new ideas are more advanced than what Rolls-Royce are suggesting, and I think various possibility. For instance, there's a UK firm which is investing in British nuclear shipping, and that is another UK-based initiative. And the Coast Guard Agency is looking at the legality of proposing the legality of having nuclear ships, nuclear-powered shipping. These small modular reactors, as we know, they power submarines now with Rolls-Royce. They can power commercial ships as well. There's a big, big future out here for all these sorts of things.
Absolutely fascinating, Professor Allison. Stay with us. We're going to come back to you after the break. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. We'll keep this discussion going with Brendan Chilchin of the Independent Business Network, with Angela Knight, former Treasury Minister, former CEO of UK Energy, Professor Wade Allison there of Oxford, and, of course, in the studio, our very own Gordon Gecko. There he is, Justin Urquhart Stewart. Your emails are flooding in. We'll be reading out some of those soon, so stay with us. You're on the money.
Hi there. A lot of cloud for many of us through the rest of today, with outbreaks of rain into the north and the west. Drier elsewhere, with still some sunshine ahead of the main weather front, which is moving into northwestern areas. This low pressure pushing towards Iceland, so far enough away from the UK, but its trailing weather fronts are bringing some outbreaks of rain to mainly northwestern, but some western parts of the UK as well. So that's where we've got the thickening cloud, turning damp across parts of Wales into the southwest as well. The more persistent rain, therefore, northwest England, western Scotland, clearing up for Northern Ireland. Ahead of the rain, actually some sunshine there for the East Midlands into East Anglia and the southeast. A little bit milder in many places compared to Sunday, 12 to 13 or 14 Celsius. Into the evening, and strengthening winds push further outbreaks of rain into the western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Trailing cloud and some small outbreaks of rain elsewhere, but generally a cloudy picture overnight, and with that breeze, it's going to be a milder night with temperatures holding up well above zero. We're looking at 8 to 12 Celsius by and large as we start off Tuesday. But a damp start there for southern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, northwest England. The rain turns up then into parts of Wales as we head into the late morning period. But it does clear Scotland and Northern Ireland, replaced by sunny spells and scattered showers along with a blustery breeze. Ahead of the rain, again, a largely fine day across East Anglia and the southeast. Even milder once more, 15 to 16 Celsius possible, but feeling a bit cooler there for Scotland and Northern Ireland as those blustery showers arrive. And they'll continue into Tuesday evening as well as Wednesday, with a lot of cloud further south on Wednesday and further outbreaks of rain at times. The rain not particularly heavy or persistent. It's mainly just a damp day on Thursday in places in the south. Sunny for most of us on Thursday before further rain on Friday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. Today, our big question: can nuclear power help solve the energy crisis? This comes after manufacturing thoroughbred Rolls-Royce secures commercial funding to develop so-called SMRs, small modular reactors, here in the UK. I'm joined by my expert panel, Wade Allison, Professor at the University of Oxford, who specialises in nuclear physics, Angela Knight, former CEO of UK Energy, Brendan Chilton, CEO and founder of Independent Business Network, and in the studio, friend of the show, Justin Urquhart-Stewart. Professor Allison, let me start again with you, if I may. I mentioned in my opening remarks, everyone knows about nuclear fission, traditional nuclear power that produces, that splits uranium atoms, produces so-called toxic waste. I've been reading about the UK-based research into nuclear fusion, which doesn't produce toxic waste. How long do you think it might be before nuclear fusion is widely used as a domestic energy source?
Well, I think it's quite a few decades yet, but let me pull you up, if I may.
Yeah.
Nuclear waste, first of all, there's very little of it because nuclear produces 1 million times as much energy per kilogram as coal. There's very little nuclear waste. Furthermore, it's almost harmless. Nobody has died in an accident with nuclear waste. And so all this fear of waste is, I don't know where it came from, but it seems it doesn't go away, and the media like to follow it, but it's not real. So I don't see the waste problem as being a reason to go for nuclear fusion. Nuclear fusion may indeed be a good thing, but we don't know, for instance, whether you can make small reactor nuclear fusion reactors. We haven't even made a large one yet. So that's all for tomorrow.
So when people hark back to the Chernobyl disaster and so on, that's because the reactor itself was damaged and failed rather than because of the byproduct of properly functioning atomic energy. Is that correct?
Well, not very many people, there were very few health effects from the radiation at Chernobyl. There were 28 people who died who went and put out the fires from helicopters and so on. And then there were probably 15 children who died of thyroid cancer, which for most people can be cured. But there is no evidence, although there are a lot of exciting videos, there are no scientific evidence that holds up which says anybody else died. And at Fukushima, it's called a disaster, but nobody died. There were no health effects except the very bad effects of moving old people out of their homes, shutting down businesses, making firms go bust because the food was condemned as inedible. And these effects are very serious.
Angela, let's come back to you. In the Chernobyl disaster, where some people did die, as Professor Allison has said, though not necessarily of the causes that most of us thought they died from, it's really imprinted on our minds, isn't it? But the nuclear industry does have something of a PR problem, doesn't it? How can it overcome that and reassure the public that nuclear waste is treated safely and doesn't represent a long-term threat to the health either of individual people or of the planet?
I think you're absolutely right, Liam. It's a very important point. And perhaps if I could just come back to the Chernobyl. I think the Chernobyl incident, also the design of the reactor was one which didn't have the additional containment. So it was an accident which was pretty well unique to a not very well built reactor in the first instance. However, even though nuclear power has been running for a very long time, even though, as you said at the outset, we were one of the first, if not the first country into nuclear power, and ours has been incredibly safe, the focus is on the few accidents that have taken place, and also, as you rightly say, on the waste issue. And I think that in people's mind, nuclear waste equals some sort of great pile, like the old slag heaps alongside, collieries and the like. I don't think they realise that it is very small. I don't think they realise that it's encased in glass. And I don't think that they realise that after that, it is very safely buried again with some more containment. So there's probably one of these things here where actually taking time to describe exactly what it is that we are talking about in size and in quantity and in what's happening to it is going to be a lot more comforting, because it then puts it into the right sort of shape and size than just glossing over it or pretending it's not there. I am very much a believer, and particularly when it comes to science, but I'm very much a believer that even though it takes a bit longer to explain an issue, the public are owed that explanation, and to truncate it into, a 30-second soundbite or a few what have yous on a Twitter feed or whatever actually serves the public badly. It may make a nice sort of glib headline, but it serves them badly. And so if I would urge the nuclear industry, and in fact, I would urge scientists now, because scientists have gone from being a boo word to a hooray word on the back of development of the vaccine. We have a hugely strong scientific network here in the UK. Rolls-Royce, of course, is all part of that. But if they get on the front foot and we properly talk about what it is that we mean about nuclear waste, about the need to have that security of power, about the proper balancing of what you can do with renewables, what you can't use renewables for, what we need as a society, our role in it. So you put it together as a piece. To my mind, that is the way ahead, and that is what the industry and the scientists are doing, just as the professor is so ably doing it on your programme today.
Brendan Chilton, briefly to you. You're CEO of the Independent Business Network. What does business make of the Gabfest up in Glasgow? Surely it should be about technology, financial incentives, and grown-up politics, rather than the endless finger-pointing.
Well, there's an awful lot of grandstanding and sound bites coming out of COP26. I think what business wants is clarity. They want to know, if we're going to have to measure our carbon footprints, how do we do it? If we can offset, how do we do it? And can we ensure that in the future, particularly for manufacturing in this country, that we've got reliable energy sources? We can't have a situation where we've had this year, where our wind farms are, not generating enough electricity for businesses as we go ahead. One of the things I think business is also concerned about is the ever-growing threat of increased taxation and regulation that's going to come out of this conference, and indeed in the years ahead. We're outside the European Union. We've just come out of a pandemic. We need our economy to become more competitive and dynamic, and not bogged down with further taxes and regulations. Simplicity is the order of the day, I think, is what business wants.
Very, very briefly to you, Justin. Do your ready reckoner, your financial acumen, will we be using more nuclear or less than we are 15-20% of our electricity now in 10 years' time?
We're going to be using much more, because if we develop these small modular reactors and they seem to be successful, they can be repeated and rolled out far more quickly.
Justin Urquhart-Stewart there. We've had Professor Wade Allison of the University of Oxford. Put my dentures back in. Thank you very much, Professor, to you. Angela Knight, former CEO of UK Energy, and, of course, Brendan Chilton, the CEO of the Independent Business Network. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, today's Money Talks interview with Avi Lazaro, the man who's dedicated over a quarter of his life to the relentless pursuit of science and technological innovation. But before that, the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. Let's get you up to date. The Prime Minister says it is very important to set the right standards for MPs. He's been speaking ahead of an emergency debate in the Commons this afternoon following accusations of corruption. Last week, the government made a U-turn after a vote was passed to overhaul its misconduct system, blocking the suspension of Owen Paterson for breaching lobbying rules. A rescue mission is underway to save a man who's been trapped in a cave in the Brecon Beacons for 2 days. He's been unable to move after reportedly injuring his back in a fall. At least 8 teams from across the UK have joined the effort to free him. A British man killed in a shark attack off Western Australia has been described as a wonderful father. 57-year-old Paul Millerchip was swimming at Port Beach near Perth when the alarm was raised. During a search for his body, police only recovered a pair of goggles. UK travellers can now fly to the United States for the first time in nearly 2 years. The US has opened its borders to fully vaccinated visitors who must also take a COVID test within 3 days of arrival. Children need to be tested 3 to 5 days later. Airlines synchronised their takeoff on both sides of the Atlantic this morning to mark the occasion. You are up to date. I'll have more on all of today's top stories for you at 2 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. You're watching On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Lots of you emailing in and tweeting on nuclear power. David says, nuclear's the only answer, but we should be moving to thorium reactors, which are safer than uranium. Lou says, the UK must increase its use of nuclear and SMRs, that's small modular reactors in particular. There's an argument around safety, but if France already gets 70% of its power from nuclear, that argument is already answered. John emailed us at gbviews@gbnews.uk to say nuclear is the future for stable electricity supply, but doesn't solve the issue with heating our homes. Electricity or heat pumps are a non-starter. Bruce says surely nuclear as an energy provider is a no-brainer. Of course it should be. Wind farms not only despoil the landscape, but don't provide anywhere near the required energy we require. Well, renewables about 2/5 of our electricity supply at the moment. Just saying. And Edward says Rolls-Royce have been building small nuclear reactors for many, many years and putting them into nuclear submarines. So they are just scaling up the design. That's true. Keep your emails coming. Tell me what you want to be discussed here on The Money. This is your show too. And now it's time for my daily in-depth interview series. Here it is. It's Money Talks. And today I'm delighted to welcome to the studio an award-winning lifestyle genetics pioneer, Avi Lazaro. Avi's unusual in being a serial entrepreneur with 4 successful business foundations in a career of 25 years, including Trimega, a UK medtech business, which he sold for a pretty penny, 8 million quid in 2012. And that's not even the half of it. Avi's currently the Europe, Middle East and African CEO of Pronetics, a global health diagnostics and solutions company, which is pioneering COVID-19 testing solutions in the UK, Hong Kong and South Africa. Avi, great to have you in the studio. Before we get going, I know your clients are very prestigious. You've got the England Wales Cricket Board, you've got the Premier League, you've got Virgin Atlantic Airways. We'll come on to all that, but just tell us a little bit about you.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and share some of the story. I've always been about business and being an entrepreneur and making things happen, and most importantly, making a social impact. And I believe that if you can make a social impact in whatever your business idea is, then of course everything else follows straight after that. So glad to have been involved in a number of businesses, everything from testing for drugs of abuse to, obviously in this case, testing COVID, as well as DNA testing for the purpose of health and lifestyle and how to exercise and eat better based on your DNA. And I think in a world where we're all moving towards personalised health, this is going to become very important.
Now, you're originally from South Africa, from Johannesburg. You're not a medic, but you spent a lot of time as an entrepreneur, as a business leader in this medical space. Why were you attracted to the medical side?
Well, I think, as many entrepreneurs do, you just get attracted to a sector that has most interest to you. So in my own case, of course, I went through a personal situation around DNA testing, which then drew me instantly into that sector because I experienced a service that I thought wasn't done very well.
Yeah.
And I looked immediately to innovate and do it better so that then when the next person went through that experience, they'd have a better one and therefore potentially choose our company, but raise the bar in the sector generally. So always looking for innovation, always looking for ways to raise the bar and provide great social impact and great service at the same time.
So often the way, isn't it, Avi? Business leaders, entrepreneurs get their ideas from just living their life and seeing things that they don't think are done properly, so they resolve to do them themselves. Now, obviously, the last year, 18 months, has been a huge moment for medical research in the UK, particularly with our vaccine rollout. In the round, to what extent, what do you think the rest of the world thinks of the UK's vaccine rollout? We were very quick out of the blocks with the approval of vaccines. Obviously, Oxford University, other UK research centres too, absolutely at the cutting edge. How's our vaccine rollout look like now? It seems to me lots of other countries have surged ahead of us.
So just briefly before answering your question, to contextualize for yourself and the audience, of course, 18 months ago, we were a 30-person business. Today, we have now more than 550 employees here in the British life science sector. So really proud of that. And, all, of course, working true to our mission, which is about bringing health closer to your home and closer to the individual. So, of course, when the pandemic impacted us all, it was an opportunity for us at Prenetics to actually live that mission more closely. And we very, very quickly moved into providing an excellent service across multiple clients, throughout the world, actually, rather than just the UK. To fast forward to the great success that we've had in terms of the vaccination program, it has been a great success. I think we all know that. We all live in testament to that. But of course, what we don't share the successes of is the little ships like ourselves, like Prenetics, that have played a great part in bringing together laboratory technologies, investments, and services to the consumer more generally. So, of course, it was like running the big engine room when everybody needed testing, and government wanted to essentially look after their testing requirements for healthcare services and NHS workers. Little ships, smaller companies like ourselves, helped to develop a world-class service to the general population. So, this investment in life sciences will live a life beyond testing for COVID and will become much more greater used for other such services.
I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Avi, without pointing fingers, but this vaccine rollout success, yes, the government was there and helped to kickstart it, but it was a private sector success story, wasn't it? Small companies like you following financial incentives and getting your ducks in a row, rather than an NHS success, even though the NHS were involved to some extent with the rollout.
Well, I think on the vaccination program in particular, I'd like to just say it's a great success, and I wouldn't want to take credit as a private company or a private sector initiative in its own right. I think in this case, government came together with private sector to generate a success story, rather than just one part of the sort of the UK's business sectors. We're not involved in the vaccination program ourselves, but we've been involved in other successes coming together with government, where private sector and government have worked together to innovate, to bring things forward into the market. And I think that's what's really important, right? That ultimately, there is a place for fast innovation. The vaccination program demonstrated innovation in healthcare and getting a product to market very quickly. The same has happened with testing capability, new initiatives, and I think this speed that we've now seen in the last 18 months will become almost a recipe for other success stories in this type of industry.
What would you say to those watching? Maybe you can help us shed light. Your own business has grown quickly in the last year or 18 months. A lot of people watching will think, why is it that my relatives in other parts of the world, other parts of Europe, they've had their PCR tests have been much, much cheaper here in the UK. The evidence is undeniable, isn't it, Avi? PCR tests here have been much, much more expensive than in other parts of certainly the European Union. Why is that?
Look, I think different countries have different requirements in terms of their testing programs and regimes. I mean, certainly as a company that have been at the forefront of providing private PCR testing, we've done our utmost to bring that cost down as best we can. In fact, we even campaigned for taking the VAT off COVID tests, which we thought was quite important, right? But saying that, I think...
Which the government never did, of course.
No, they didn't, but certainly the awareness about driving the cost
down. But private companies could have, if they didn't get the VAT lift, they could have, cut into their margins. The margins on this have been huge, haven't they?
Yeah, well, I think our approach, and I've been privileged to come into GB News to talk about exactly this topic, it's all about quality of service. So, for example, if you want to, in the case of the travel industry, where we focused on this PCR testing requirement, provide a great service, have a call centre with, in our case, 120 people, have the ability to help anxious travellers, by way of example, be less anxious, that comes with an infrastructure, and an infrastructure comes with a cost. So as long as you're a responsible provider in this sector, I think there's a cost justification. But talking about us, we're not a PCR testing company. We're a life sciences health testing company. The global diagnostics market is worth approximately $1 trillion. And what we see, and what we are hoping to very closely stay attuned to and move into, is that this health diagnostic market is going to now become a home health diagnostic market. So we bring in products to market where you can test in your home, whether it's for a PCR test at sort of PCR quality, a COVID test at PCR quality, whether it's things like sexual health, whether it's things like diabetes. This will all be able to be done in your home in the future, and we're proud to be part of that and championing that exact initiative.
That's really interesting, Avi. So while your business has grown a lot, you talked about the employee numbers yourselves, a big multiple increase during this COVID pandemic, and your firm has been involved to some degree in helping to roll out the PCR tests and help people meet those government requirements and so on. Can your company keep growing at the rate it is, or at least maintain its existing side once we move to a post-COVID world where we're not all having to get PCR tests? Well, we're not now, are we? We're mainly relying on lateral flow tests now in almost all cases when we travel.
Yeah, I mean, as indicated, I mean, we've just been privileged to be supporting the COVID requirements, whether it's PCR testing or lateral flow testing, for example. But our core business is about DNA testing generally. It's about colon cancer testing, for example. It's about the future of where health is going to go. And, we're well positioned with a strong product pipeline to make sure that as we've all now become accustomed to self-testing and what we call home diagnostics, that we would be able to service that market greater. I mean, in the UK, for example, the NHS is moving to community diagnostic centres. So they're trying to shift the burden from the NHS into the community.
From big hospitals or even the GPs to this kind of interim facility where people can get tested more conveniently.
Exactly. So if you look at Pronetics across the country, we have now 35 health pods around the country that we used for the workplace. Before you went to work, you could get a test of some sort. So we'd hope to disrupt that whole space and actually offer other tests. Would help, well, hopefully help to bring those pods into life for this community diagnostics opportunity. So I think as we see the democratization of health into the home and into the community, what we'll then see is companies like Pronetics, there are others out there who are attempting to do the same thing, help facilitate and accelerate that pathway. And I think that's really exciting.
So to people who aren't really up with the science and the latest in the industry, as you obviously are, Avi, tell us some of the conditions that can be home diagnosed or diagnosed much more simply without going to a hospital now that couldn't be, say, 5 or 10 years ago. Where is this heading?
Sure. I mean, there's big markets for male care, fem care, as we call it, without getting too technical, looking at things like markers for diabetes. HB1AC is the technical blood marker, for example. Sexual health is a very big market. If you look at our colleagues in the US, I mean, subscription sexual health services is huge. I mean, people who choose to live a particular lifestyle have an essence of responsibility, so they would subscribe to these sorts of services as opposed to going into a clinic. And I think all these sorts of testing services from your home will take pressure off the NHS and will help us all think about our health differently moving forward as a lifestyle than otherwise.
But just to reassure viewers, there's no way, or is there, maybe you can inform me, that things like cancer diagnoses, MRI scans that do involve heavy, important, very expensive hospital equipment, there's no sense that the provision of those is going to be reduced because of this sort of home diagnostics revolution, is there?
No, I don't think there's a sense that it will be reduced, but I think you'll see what's termed as an asynchronous hybrid model, where you might be able to get certain bits of information at your pharmacist or in the community diagnostic centre, and that will be wrapped around in a package electronically, safely, securely sent to a physician who could then obviously look at that, a clinician. So I think that what will happen is you'll see innovation in healthcare, you'll see different models coming together. The consumer will be much more sensitized to, continuing through those pathways as they have never done before because of the pandemic. Because we've swabbed ourselves and our children on a frequent basis, it won't be an alarming thing to do a swab or do a test at home in order to get your health report sent to you at some point in the future. So I think that's definitely the way it will go.
Where does GB UK stand internationally, Avi, in terms of the use of these home diagnostics compared to, say, America, compared to mainland Europe, compared to Japan?
Well, I always like to talk about genomics, right, in the context of the UK. So I would say that the UK is at the forefront of the genomics revolution. I think there's a huge appetite now and a huge shift from one pill per person, or one pill per everybody to one pill per person. And I think that's where it's going to go, personalised health. And so the UK is positioned very, very well. I mean, a lot of the variants which we are now finding out relate from the pandemic are actually discovered in the UK. I understand Porton Down, for example, are sequencing on a regular basis. That's because we have such a great sequencing capability, meaning we can look at your DNA, and through your DNA we can determine if you might have what's known as a predisposition to a type of cancer or a type of genetic disorder. And I think, even in the last 24 hours, we've read in the Times that, cancer diagnosis and treatment is going to be much more precision orientated because of genomics. And I think that's going to help us all move to a different world in terms of treatment. You look at countries like Estonia, I believe approximately 25% of the population are genetically tested at birth. So when you get to the doctor and the doctor gives you a prescription, they give you a prescription that's built upon your DNA. That's right for you, not right for everybody as they would have prescribed in the past. So we're going to see huge acceleration. We already have, and I think the pandemic has helped that acceleration move forward. And companies like Prenetics are positioned very well because of their investment in the sector to take advantage of that.
It's very interesting. Just finally, Avi, you're not a medic, as we've said. You don't claim to be, but you are very experienced in the economics of medicine, and particularly in the space that Prenetics fills. So let me ask you this. I think a lot of viewers will be interested in your answer. Where do you think we are now in terms of COVID? Do you think the UK can now really grasp this post-COVID world? In your heart of hearts, do you think we're properly through this, or mostly through this now?
So I think in my heart of hearts, as a business, we see that there will always be a form of testing moving forward. As a company, we work with a number of airports. We have laboratories with our partners at airports, and testing.
Do you think COVID testing is going to be around? It'll just get easier and cheaper?
I think that there'll always be a sense of testing around. I think the UK, as we know, as other countries are moving to an element of surveillance testing, whether it's within wastewater samples, for example, looking at protecting our environment through different technologies. So I think testing and surveillance protection from the environment perspective in health will be here to stay for sure.
Avi Lazar, I really enjoyed that conversation. CEO of Prenetics.
Thank you very much.
Good luck with your business. That's all for today, folks. You've been watching On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. Every weekday at 1 p.m, I bring you your daily dose, get it, of economics, business and consumer news. So join me at 1 p.m. tomorrow, or catch up with previous episodes via the GB News app. Check out my Money Talks interview series on Apple iTunes, also on the GB News YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On The Money.
Hi there. A lot of cloud for many of us through the rest of today, with outbreaks of rain into the north and the west. Drier elsewhere, with still some sunshine ahead of the main weather front, which is moving into northwestern areas. This low pressure pushing towards Iceland, so far enough away from the UK, but its trailing weather fronts are bringing some outbreaks of rain to mainly northwestern, but some western parts of the UK as well. So that's where we've got the thickening cloud, turning damp across parts of Wales into the southwest as well. The more persistent rain, therefore, northwest England, western Scotland, clearing up for Northern Ireland. Ahead of the rain, actually some sunshine there for the East Midlands into East Anglia and the southeast. A little bit milder in many places compared to Sunday, 12 to 13 or 14 Celsius. Into the evening, and strengthening winds push further outbreaks of rain into western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland, trailing cloud and some small outbreaks of rain elsewhere, but generally a cloudy picture overnight, and with that breeze, it's going to be a milder night with temperatures holding up well above zero. We're looking at 8 to 12 Celsius by and large as we start off Tuesday. But a damp start there for southern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, northwest England. The rain turns up then into parts of Wales as we head into the late morning period. But it does clear Scotland and Northern Ireland, replaced by sunny spells and scattered showers along with a blustery breeze. Ahead of the rain, again, a largely fine day across East Anglia in the southeast. Even milder once more, 15 to 16 Celsius possible, but feeling a bit cooler there for Scotland and Northern Ireland as those blustery showers arrive. And they'll continue into Tuesday evening as well as Wednesday, with a lot of cloud further south on Wednesday and further outbreaks of rain at times. The rain not particularly heavy or persistent. It's mainly just a damp day on Thursday in places in the south. Sunny for most of us on Thursday before further rain on Friday.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for free